The ink on the divorce papers wasn't even dry when Caleb Sterling ordered his celebratory scotch. He looked at the woman sitting across from him, Sienna, wearing that same faded grey cardigan she'd worn for 5 years, and he felt nothing but relief. He was the CEO of a rising tech empire. She was the anchor dragging him down. He thought he had won. He thought he was the king of New York. But Caleb didn't know that the silence from his ex-wife wasn't defeat. It was patience. He had no idea that while he was planning his IPO, a Gulfstream G650 was already fueling up on a private strip in Zurich, preparing to shatter his reality. When that jet lands, Caleb realizes too late. He didn't just divorce a housewife. He divorced the heir to a kingdom he couldn't even afford to visit. The rain battered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the law firm, Pendleton and O'Malley, blurring the Manhattan skyline into a smear of greys and charcoal. It was fitting weather for a funeral, which is exactly what Caleb Sterling considered this meeting to be. The funeral of a mistake. Sign here, and the townhouse in emotional distress clause is waived, the lawyer, Arthur Pendleton, said. His voice was dry, like shifting sand. Caleb didn't hesitate. He uncapped his fountain pen, a Mont Blanc he'd bought himself after closing his first Series A funding, and scrawled his signature with a flourish. He looked up, his jaw set in the square, handsome line that had graced the cover of Forbes 30 Under 30 just last month. Across the mahogany table sat Sienna. She looked small. She was wearing a simple woolen coat that had seen better days, her brown hair pulled back in a messy bun held together by a cheap plastic clip. She didn't look like the wife of a man whose company, Sterling Dynamics, was valued at $40 million. She looked like a librarian who had gotten lost in the financial district. "Sienna," Caleb said, his tone dropping an octave, feigning a sympathy he didn't feel. "I want you to know I'm being generous here. The alimony payments are significantly higher than the state requires. You'll be comfortable. You can finally start that. Whatever it was. That bakery you talked about." Sienna stared at the papers. Her eyes were dark, unreadable. For years, Caleb had interpreted her silence as stupidity, or at least passivity. She was the woman who made his coffee, ironed his shirts, and nodded politely at dinner parties while he discussed algorithms and market shares. She was the safe harbor he had docked in while he built his ship. But now, he was an ocean liner, and he needed open water. "I don't want the alimony, Caleb," she said softly. The room went silent. Even Arthur, the seasoned divorce attorney who had seen everything from thrown vases to hidden offshore accounts, paused. Caleb laughed, a sharp, incredulous sound. "Sienna, be realistic. You haven't worked in 6 years. You have a degree in art history. How do you plan to survive in this city? Selling paintings on the sidewalk?" He checked his watch, a Patek Philippe Nautilus. He had a lunch reservation at Le Bernardin with Lydia. Lydia, who wore Prada, who understood venture capital, who looked good on his arm at galas. "I'll manage," Sienna said. She picked up the pen. Her hand didn't shake. "I just want the clean break. No spousal support. No claim to your shares in Sterling Dynamics. Just the divorce." Caleb narrowed his eyes. Was this a trick? Was she trying to play the martyr, to guilt him later? "If you sign that waiver," Arthur interjected, looking over his spectacles, "you cannot come back for a modification later, Mrs. Sterling. This is final." "I understand," she said. She signed. Sienna Cole. She dropped the Sterling immediately, as if the name burned her fingers. Caleb felt a surge of triumph mixed with irritation. He had prepared a speech about how they had grown apart, how his world was just too fast for her. He wanted her to cry, to beg, so he could feel the magnanimity of rejecting her gently. Her indifference robbed him of the climax. "Fine," Caleb said, standing up and buttoning his Italian suit jacket. "If you want to be a martyr, that's your choice. But don't come crawling back when the rent comes due on whatever studio apartment you find." Sienna stood up too. She picked up her worn leather bag. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time in months. There was no anger in her eyes. There was something far worse. Pity. "Goodbye, Caleb," she said. "I hope the view from the top is everything you think it is." She walked out of the conference room without looking back. Caleb exhaled, straightening his tie. "Can you believe her?" he asked the lawyer. "Turning down $10,000 a month. She's delusional." Arthur Pendleton was stacking the papers, a frown creasing his forehead. He had noticed something Caleb hadn't. The pen Sienna had used. She had pulled it from her own bag before using the office one. It was an old, heavy thing, black lacquer with a specific crest on the cap, a crest Arthur had seen only once before, on a letterhead from a private bank in Geneva that didn't accept applications. "Mr. Sterling," Arthur said slowly. "Are you sure you knew your wife's family background?" "Orphan," Caleb waved a hand dismissively. "Raised by her grandmother in some small town in Connecticut. No money, no connections. That's why I married her, Arthur. No baggage. Just a simple girl." "Right," Arthur muttered, watching the door close. "Simple." Caleb didn't hear him. He was already texting Lydia. Done. Free. "Champagne on ice?" He walked out of the building and into the rain, feeling weightless. He had shed his skin. He was ready to ascend. 6 months later. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was a sea of black ties and designer gowns. The air smelled of expensive perfume and ambition. This was the annual Tech Innovators Gala, and tonight, Caleb Sterling was the man of the hour. Sterling Dynamics had gone public 3 days ago. The IPO had exceeded expectations. The stock was soaring, and Caleb's net worth had officially crossed the 9-figure mark. He wasn't just rich, he was wealthy. He stood near the ice sculpture, a glass of Dom Perignon in hand, with Lydia Vane draped over his shoulder. Lydia was everything Sienna wasn't. She was sharp, loud, and glittered in a sequined red dress that screamed for attention. She was the VP of marketing for a rival firm, and together they were the power couple of the season. "They're all looking at you, darling," Lydia whispered, tracing the lapel of his tuxedo. "You own this room." "We own this room," Caleb corrected, clinking his glass against hers. He scanned the crowd, soaking in the envy of his competitors. He saw old rivals nodding with newfound respect. He saw bankers who had rejected his loan applications 3 years ago, now waiting for a chance to shake his hand. "Mr. Sterling," a young journalist from Bloomberg approached, holding a recorder. "Congratulations on the IPO. The market is calling you the new visionary of cloud computing. How does it feel?" Caleb put on his media smile, practiced, humble, yet confident. "It feels like the beginning, really. We stripped away the inefficiencies in our lives." He squeezed Lydia's waist and focused purely on growth. Innovation requires shedding the old to make way for the new. It was a veiled dig at his past life, a quote he had used in 3 interviews already. He loved the sound of it. "Speaking of the new," the journalist asked, checking her notes, "there's a rumor circulating about a massive private equity buy-in, something about the Obsidian Trust acquiring significant stakes in tech infrastructure. Are you worried about a hostile takeover?" Caleb laughed. "The Obsidian Trust? Sounds like something from a comic book. Look, we have a poison pill strategy. No one takes over Sterling without my say-so. Besides, who has that kind of liquidity in this economy?" No one knows who runs it, the journalist pressed. But they've bought out 3 logistics companies in London and a semiconductor firm in Taiwan just this week. They say the head of the trust is coming to New York. Let them come, Caleb said arrogantly. I'll buy them a drink. He dismissed the journalist and turned back to Lydia, but his mood had soured slightly. He hated not knowing things. Who is the Obsidian Trust? Lydia asked, sipping her drink. Ghost money, Caleb scoffed. Probably some Saudi oil fund or a Russian oligarch trying to wash cash. It doesn't concern us. Just then, a hush fell over the entrance of the ballroom. The heavy double doors swung open, admitting a draught of cool air. The chatter didn't stop all at once. It rippled into silence, like a wave crashing against a shore. Caleb turned to see what the distraction was. Walking in was a man who looked like he had been carved out of granite. He was older, perhaps in his late 50s, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than Caleb's first car. He walked with a cane, but he didn't lean on it. He carried it like a weapon. Flanking him were 4 security guards, not the hotel staff, but private detail. Earpieces, bulky suits, serious eyes. That's Lord Dominic Vale, a banker whispered behind Caleb. British steel magnate, old money. I thought he never left London. Caleb straightened up. A connection like Dominic Vale could double his stock price overnight. Stay here, he told Lydia. Caleb smoothed his jacket and made his move. He wove through the crowd, positioning himself to intercept the British billionaire near the bar. Lord Vale, Caleb said, extending his hand as he approached. Caleb Sterling, it's an honor. I'm a great admirer of your work in heavy industry. Dominic Vale stopped. He looked at Caleb's hand, then up at his face. His eyes were a piercing, icy blue. He didn't shake the hand. Sterling, Vale said. The name rolled off his tongue with a distinct lack of warmth. The man who just went public, the cloud computing fellow. That's right, Caleb smiled, dropping his hand, but keeping his composure. We're celebrating tonight. I'd love to buy you a drink and discuss. I didn't come here for the cloud, Mr. Sterling, Vale interrupted. His voice was quiet, but it carried. And I certainly didn't come to drink with the man who discarded a diamond because he thought it was glass. Caleb froze. The smile faltered. Excuse me. Vale stepped closer, invading Caleb's personal space. You have a remarkably poor appraisal of value for a CEO. You think you've risen high? You're standing on a sandcastle, boy, and the tide is coming in. Before Caleb could respond, Vale turned his back on him. Check the guest list for the VIP suite, Vale barked at his assistant, loud enough for the nearby circle to hear. She arrives in an hour. I want the path clear. No photographers. If anyone harasses her, destroy their cameras. Who is arriving? Someone whispered. Caleb stood there, his face burning. He had just been publicly snubbed by one of the richest men in Europe. Lydia appeared at his elbow, looking concerned. What happened? What did he say? He's senile, Caleb hissed, his fists clenching. Talking in riddles. But a seed of unease had been planted in his gut. Discarded a diamond because he thought it was glass. The phrase gnawed at him. Suddenly, the large screens behind the stage, usually displaying the Sterling Dynamics logo, flickered. The music lowered. It was time for the main presentation, the Future of Tech keynote. But instead of the scheduled programming, a breaking news banner from CNBC flashed on the screen. The room gasped. Breaking. Obsidian Trust reveals majority stake in New York real estate and tech sectors. Subheader. Mystery heiress to lead the conglomerate. Caleb stared at the screen. What is this? Turn it off, he shouted at the AV tech. But the screen changed again. It showed live footage from Teterboro Airport, just outside the city. A massive, sleek black jet was taxiing on the runway. It wasn't just any jet. It was a customized Boeing business jet, larger than anything Caleb had ever flown in. The tail number was visible. OB1. The camera zoomed in as the stairs lowered. The reporter's voice boomed over the ballroom speakers. "We are getting our first look at the elusive head of the Obsidian Trust, the entity that has quietly purchased 40% of the commercial debt in Manhattan over the last 6 months. Sources say she is returning to New York to reclaim family assets." A figure emerged at the top of the stairs. The wind whipped her trench coat. She wore sunglasses, despite the night. She was flanked by staff. But even from the grainy footage, Caleb recognized the posture. He recognized the way she held her head. The camera zoomed in as she took off her sunglasses to look at the waiting limousine. The ballroom went deathly silent. Caleb's glass slipped from his fingers and shattered on the marble floor. Champagne soaked his shoes, but he didn't move. It was Sienna. But it wasn't the Sienna in the grey cardigan. She was wearing a tailored suit that screamed power. Her hair was sharp, styled. She looked dangerous. The reporter continued, "Ladies and gentlemen, the chairwoman of the Obsidian Trust, the sole heiress to the Vale dynasty, Sienna Vale Cole." Caleb stopped breathing. Lydia grabbed his arm, her nails digging into his skin. "Caleb, isn't that your ex-wife?" Dominic Vale, standing 10 feet away, turned back to Caleb. The old man smiled, a shark showing its teeth. "As I said, Mr. Sterling," Vale called out, "the tide is in." The silence in the Plaza ballroom didn't last. It fractured into 1,000 whispers that sounded like hissing steam. Every eye that had held admiration for Caleb Sterling 5 minutes ago now held open, vicious curiosity. Caleb felt the champagne seeping through his sock, a cold, sticky reminder of his humiliation. He looked at the screens, which were now back to displaying the Sterling Dynamics logo, but the image of Sienna stepping off that jet was burned into his retinas. "Caleb!" Lydia hissed, shaking his arm violently. "What is going on? You said she was a nobody. You said she grew up in a trailer park in Connecticut." I thought she did," Caleb stammered. His throat felt dry as dust. The air in the ballroom suddenly felt thin. He looked around wildly for Lord Dominic Vale, but the older man was already surrounded by a phalanx of security, moving toward the exit. Vale had dropped the bomb and was leaving before the smoke cleared. Caleb needed answers. He couldn't get them here, not while he was the center of this sudden, grotesque spectacle. "We're leaving," Caleb said, grabbing Lydia's hand. "But the keynote," Lydia protested, looking at the stage where the host was trying to awkwardly regain control of the room. "You have to give your speech." "To hell with the speech," Caleb snapped. He dragged her toward the side exit, pushing past confused waiters and gleeful rivals. He heard a snicker as he passed. It sounded like the CEO of a logistics company he had crushed last year. Outside the hotel, the night air was brisk. Caleb's driver was waiting, but Caleb waved him off. He needed to think. He needed to move. He started walking rapidly down Fifth Avenue, Lydia clicking angrily behind him in her heels. He pulled out his phone and dialed Arthur Pendleton, his divorce lawyer. "Arthur, it's Caleb. You knew, didn't you?" Arthur's voice was groggy. It was late. "Knew what, Caleb?" "The pen. You mentioned the damn pen. The crest. You knew who she was." There was a long sigh on the other end of the line. "I suspected, Caleb. The crest was from the Vale Rothschild banking dynasty. Very old, very private European money. But when I asked you, you dismissed it. You were so certain she was penniless." "Why didn't you push me?" Caleb shouted, causing a passing couple to stare. "Because you paid me to execute a fast divorce, not to conduct a genealogical background check. You told me she was simple. You were in a rush to get to the bubbly with Miss Vane." Caleb hung up. He felt sick. He remembered the divorce negotiation. Sienna's refusal of alimony, the pity in her eyes. "I hope the view from the top is everything you think it is." She wasn't being a martyr. She didn't need his $10,000 a month because she probably spent that on flower arrangements before breakfast. She had pitied him because he was fighting over crumbs while she owned the bakery. "Caleb, talk to me." Lydia finally caught up to him, out of breath. "If she's that rich, why did she live like that with you? Why did she wear those awful sweaters?" Caleb stopped abruptly on the sidewalk. That was the question that terrified him the most. Why hide it? Why live in a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn for 5 years, clipping coupons and budgeting for vacations, when she could have bought the whole borough? "A test," Caleb whispered, the realization hitting him with the force of a physical blow. It had been a 5-year test. She wanted to know if he loved her. Sienna Cole, the art student with no connections. And he had failed spectacularly. He hadn't just failed. He had proven himself to be exactly the kind of shallow, grasping climber her family probably despised. His phone buzzed. It was an email alert from his own company's internal server. A memo sent to the board of directors of Sterling Dynamics. Subject: Notice of significant share acquisition. His heart hammered against his ribs. He opened the email. It was dry legalese, but the meaning was clear. An entity known as Obsidian Trust had just executed a series of after-hours block trades. They hadn't just bought shares, they had bought positions. They now owned 18% of Sterling Dynamics. Caleb leaned against the stone facade of a luxury jewelry store, gasping for air. 18% was enough to demand a board seat. It was enough to disrupt operations. It was an invasion force. "She's not just back," Caleb said, staring at his reflection in the shop window. He looked pale, sweaty, his tie askew. "She's attacking." He had to find her. He had to fix this. He didn't know how, but the Caleb Sterling who could charm venture capitalists out of millions had to be able to handle his own ex-wife. He opened his rideshare app. He knew where she would be. There was only one building in the city that matched the scale of that arrival. The newly completed Ethelred Tower overlooking Central Park. The penthouse there was rumored to have sold for $200 million last month to an anonymous buyer. It wasn't a rumor anymore. The lobby of the Ethelred Tower made the plaza look cheap. It was all seamless Italian marble, minimalist water features, and a silence that felt expensive. When Caleb walked in, Lydia trailing behind him, looking increasingly unsure of her position. The concierge didn't even look up from his screen. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone indicating that he very much doubted he could. "I'm here to see Sienna Cole, or Vale, whatever she's calling herself," Caleb demanded, trying to inject his usual CEO authority into his voice. The concierge looked up slowly. He recognized Caleb, or at least recognized the type. "Madame Vale is not receiving visitors." "Tell her it's her husband," Lydia piped up, trying to be helpful. The concierge's eyebrow raised a fraction of an inch. "Ex-husband, I believe the records show. Madame Vale made it clear that no unauthorized persons were to be admitted to the penthouse floor, especially not Mr. Sterling. Listen to me." Caleb leaned over the desk, his patience gone. "I am the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I need 5 minutes with her. It's a matter of national financial security." "Mr. Sterling," the concierge said, his voice practically arctic. "The woman upstairs owns the bank that holds the mortgage on your company's headquarters. Your status is relative here. Please leave before I call security." 2 large men in dark suits materialized from the shadows of the lobby. Caleb was about to make a scene when the private elevator at the far end of the lobby chimed. The doors slid open. Standing there was Dominic Vale, leaning on his cane. He looked at Caleb with amused contempt. "Persistent little bugger, aren't you?" Lord Vale said. "I need to see her, Dominic," Caleb pleaded, dropping the formalities. "There's been a misunderstanding," Vale chuckled, a harsh sound. "There's been no misunderstanding, boy. You understood her perfectly as a poor nobody. Now you need to understand her as she is. Come up. She's expecting you. Just you. The showgirl stays here." Lydia bristled. "Excuse me?" "Wait here," Caleb commanded Lydia, not even looking at her. He stepped toward the elevator. The ride up was agonizingly fast. The elevator didn't have numbers, just a single button for the penthouse. When the doors opened, Caleb stepped directly into a living space that was larger than the entire floor of his office building. It was a cavern of glass walls overlooking the entire expanse of Central Park, which looked like a dark, rectangular patch below the glittering city. The furniture was sparse, sculptural, and terrifyingly expensive. A genuine Rothko painting hung on one of the few solid walls, a block of deep, angry red. Sienna was standing by the window, her back to him. She was still wearing the suit from the airport. She didn't turn when he entered. "It's a nice view," Caleb said. His voice echoed in the vast space, sounding pathetic. "It is," she said. Her voice was different. The softness was gone. It was deeper, resonant, holding a natural authority he had never heard before. "Better than the view from your office, I imagine." She turned slowly. Caleb felt a jolt in his chest. It was Sienna, but it wasn't. Her hair was cut into a sharp, asymmetrical bob that framed her face brilliantly. Her makeup was flawless, highlighting cheekbones he swore she didn't used to have. But it was the eyes. They weren't passive brown pools anymore. They were obsidian, dark, hard, and intensely focused. "Sienna," he started, walking toward her, putting on his best, contrite husband face. "Babe, why didn't you tell me? This whole masquerade, it was cruel." She watched him approach, her expression unchanging. When he got within 3 feet, she raised a hand. He stopped instantly. "Do not call me that," she said, "and do not step closer." Okay, I'm just shocked. I saw the news, the plane, Dominic. It's a lot to take in." He tried a smile. "You really got me. The poor art student routine. You deserve an Oscar." "It wasn't a routine, Caleb. I was an art student. I just happened to have a trust fund, larger than the GDP of several small nations. But why hide it? We were married. Partners." She laughed. It wasn't the gentle laugh he remembered. It was cold. "Partners? Caleb, I was an accessory. I was something you kept around because I was low maintenance and didn't threaten your ego. You didn't want a partner. You wanted an audience." "That's not fair. I built a company. I was under pressure. I did it for us." "You did it for you," she corrected sharply. "Don't rewrite history. I sat across from you in that law firm 6 months ago. I saw the relief in your eyes when I signed those papers. You threw me away like garbage the moment you thought you'd outgrown me." Caleb felt anger rising to combat the shame. "So this is revenge? You came back to rub my nose in it? Buying 18% of my company just to spite me?" Sienna walked over to a sleek bar carved from a single block of marble and poured herself a glass of sparkling water. She didn't offer him one. "You overvalue yourself, Caleb. My return to New York has nothing to do with you. The Vale family has interests here that require management. My uncle is retiring. I am taking the helm. Sterling Dynamics just happened to be an undervalued asset with an unstable CEO." "Unstable?" Caleb sputtered. "I just took it public. We're the market darlings." She took a sip of water, eyeing him over the rim of the glass. "You're leveraged to the hilt. Your Q3 projections are based on vaporware you haven't developed yet, and your public image is tied to a man who just became the laughingstock of the global financial community on live television." She set the glass down with a sharp clack. "My analysts flagged your company as vulnerable a month ago. We bought in because it's good business. The fact that it ruins your day is just a bonus." Caleb stared at her. He realized with terrifying clarity that he didn't know this woman at all. The meek housewife was gone. In her place was a titan of industry who spoke his language better than he did. "What do you want, Sienna?" he asked, his voice hollow. She walked back to the window, looking out over the city lights that she now seemingly controlled. "I want a seat on the board," she said calmly, "and I want you to step down as chairman. You can remain CEO for now, but you will answer to me." Caleb felt his knees buckle. It was his company. He had built it from a garage startup. "You can't be serious. I won't do it." Sienna turned her head slightly, offering him a profile view that was pure, cold marble. "Then the Obsidian Trust will continue buying. Tomorrow morning, we will initiate a hostile takeover. We have the liquidity to buy every outstanding share by lunchtime. You'll be out entirely, with nothing but your golden parachute and the embarrassing story of how your ex-wife bought your life's work out from under you." She turned fully to face him again. "The choice is yours, Caleb. You can be my employee, or you can be unemployed. You have until the market opens at 9:30 a.m. The sun rose over Manhattan, but for Caleb Sterling, it felt like the onset of a nuclear winter. He hadn't slept. He had spent the hours between his humiliation at the Ethelred Tower and the opening of the market making frantic phone calls. He needed the board of directors. Sterling Dynamics had a board of 7. Caleb needed 4 votes to block a hostile takeover or a leadership shakeup. He was certain he had 3: old friends, early investors who believed in his vision. He just needed 1 more. At 7 a.m., the conference room at Sterling Dynamics HQ was cold and smelled of stale coffee. The view of the Hudson River usually calmed him, but today the grey water looked like a tomb. The board members filed in one by one. There was Silas Pendergrass, a venture capitalist who had backed Caleb's Series A. There was Julia Merritt, a tech heiress, and there was Arthur Banks, a conservative banker who usually rubber-stamped whatever Caleb wanted. They refused to make eye contact. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," Caleb said, standing at the head of the table. He was wearing a fresh suit, but his eyes were bloodshot. "As you know, there has been an aggressive move by the Obsidian Trust. They claim to own 18%. They are threatening a tender offer." He paused, leaning his knuckles on the table. "But this isn't business. It's personal. The head of the trust is my ex-wife. She is acting out of emotional vindictiveness. We have to stand firm. If we implement the poison pill now, we can dilute her shares and—" "Sit down, Caleb," Silas Pendergrass said quietly. Caleb froze. Silas had been his mentor. "Excuse me?" "We aren't implementing a poison pill," Silas said, taking off his glasses and rubbing the bridge of his nose. "We've already reviewed the proposal from Obsidian." "Proposal? What proposal?" Caleb looked around the table. "I'm the chairman. All proposals go through me." The heavy oak doors at the end of the room opened. Sienna walked in. She wasn't wearing the power suit from the night before. She wore a simple, cream-colored cashmere dress that looked soft but cost more than the average employee's salary. She carried no notes, no briefcase, just a tablet. Lord Dominic Vale walked a step behind her, acting as her silent enforcer. "Good morning," Sienna said. Her voice was calm, professional. She didn't even look at Caleb. She took the empty seat at the opposite end of the table, the seat usually reserved for the CFO. "You have no right to be here," Caleb snapped, pointing a trembling finger. "This is a closed session." "Actually," Julia Merritt spoke up, her voice tight. "We invited her, Caleb." Caleb felt the floor drop out from under him. "You... what?" "Obsidian isn't just offering to buy shares," Arthur Banks explained, looking at his hands. "They are offering to inject $300 million in liquid capital into the R&D division, at zero interest, effectively immediately, on one condition." Caleb knew the condition before they said it. "That I step down," he whispered. "That the governance structure changes," Sienna corrected him. She finally looked at him. Her gaze was devoid of the warmth he remembered from their marriage. It was the look a surgeon gives a patient before making an incision. "The board has agreed that your leadership style has become distracted. The volatility of your public image is a liability." "I built this," Caleb shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "I built this from nothing. While you were at home baking bread, I was coding the kernel for the platform that runs this city." "And while you were coding," Sienna said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "I was managing the household budget you restricted to a pittance. I was editing your pitch decks at 2 a.m. because your grammar was atrocious. I was the one who told you to pivot to cloud architecture in 2019 when you wanted to focus on hardware." "Do you remember that, Caleb? Or did you think that was your idea, too?" The room went silent. Caleb opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He remembered. He had forgotten that he remembered, but the memory was there. Sienna, sitting on the floor of their old apartment, reading his drafts, making notes in the margins. He had taken the credit. He had always taken the credit. "The vote has been cast electronically," Silas said softly. "It was unanimous, Caleb. You are removed as chairman of the board. Sienna Vale Cole is the new chairwoman." Caleb looked at his allies. They looked away. Money didn't just talk, it screamed. And Sienna had brought a megaphone. "You remain CEO," Sienna continued, tapping her screen. "For now. But you are on probation. You have strict KPIs to meet, and your discretionary spending account is frozen. No more corporate jets. No more expensed dinners at Le Bernardin." She stood up. The meeting was over. She hadn't been there for 5 minutes, and she had effectively castrated him professionally. "One more thing," Sienna said, pausing at the door. "The VP of Marketing position. It's being made redundant." Caleb's head snapped up. "Lydia, you can't fire her. She's vital to the brand." "She's vital to your ego," Sienna said coldly. "Her campaigns are derivative, and her budget is bloated. She's out, effective immediately. Security is escorting her from the building as we speak." "This is jealousy," Caleb yelled, desperate to land a blow. "You're just jealous because she replaced you." Sienna turned back slowly. She looked at Caleb with a mixture of amusement and pity that was far worse than hatred. "Caleb," she said softly, "I'm a Vale. We don't get jealous. We get equity." She walked out. Caleb didn't leave his office for hours. He sat in his ergonomically perfect chair, staring at the digital ticker on his wall. Sterling Dynamics stock was up 12% on the news of the Obsidian investment. The market loved Sienna. They loved the stability of old money. They didn't care that the founder had just been publicly neutered. His phone buzzed. It was Lydia. "Caleb, meet me at the apartment. Now." He grabbed his coat. He needed comfort. He needed someone to tell him that Sienna was a witch, that they would fight this together. Lydia was a fighter. She would understand. He took a cab. His driver had been reassigned to the pool, to the penthouse apartment he rented in Tribeca. When he walked in, the place was in chaos. Suitcases were open on the floor. Clothes were being thrown haphazardly into them. Lydia was storming around the bedroom, shoving designer shoes into a duffel bag. "Lydia, what are you doing?" Caleb asked, loosening his tie. "I know, it's a nightmare. She fired you, but we'll fix it. I'll hire you as a consultant. I'll pay you out of my own pocket." Lydia stopped packing. She turned to look at him. Her mascara was smudged, but not from crying, from rage. "Your own pocket?" she scoffed. "You don't have a pocket anymore, Caleb. I checked the accounts. She froze your stock options. You're on a salary. A salary." "It's a temporary setback," Caleb pleaded, reaching for her arm. She jerked away. "It's over, Caleb," she spat. "Do you think I stuck around for your sparkling personality? You were the golden boy. You were the ticket to the A-list. Now? Now you're just the ex-husband of the most powerful woman in New York. You're a joke. Twitter is already making memes about you." She held up her phone. There was a picture of Caleb from the gala, looking confused, next to a picture of Sienna looking like a queen, with the caption, "When you trade a diamond for a cubic zirconia." "Don't listen to them," Caleb said, his voice cracking. "I still have the company. I'm the CEO. For how long?" Lydia zipped up her bag. "She's going to eat you alive, and I'm not going down with the ship. I have a meeting with Google in an hour. I'm not letting your failure stain my resume." She walked past him, dragging her suitcase. The wheels rumbled on the hardwood floor, the sound of his life departing. "Lydia, please, I love you." She paused at the door. She looked back, her expression hard. "You don't know how to love anyone, Caleb. You only love how people make you look. And right now, you look pathetic." The door slammed. Caleb stood in the silence of the luxury apartment. It felt massive and empty. He walked to the kitchen and opened the fridge. A bottle of expensive Pinot Noir sat there. He uncorked it and drank straight from the bottle. He was alone. No wife, no girlfriend, no chairmanship. A dark rage began to bubble in his gut. It replaced the shame. Sienna had tricked him. She had lied to him for 5 years. That had to be illegal, or at least immoral. Why? The question haunted him. Why the masquerade? He went to his study and opened his laptop. He started searching. Not for stock prices, but for Vale. He bypassed the business articles and dove into the archives. European gossip columns, old society papers, scanned microfiche from the 90s. He spent 4 hours digging. He drank half the bottle of wine. And then he found it. It was a scanned article from a Swiss newspaper dated 10 years ago. A tragedy in the Alps. A kidnapping attempt gone wrong. Heiress Sienna Vale, 18, survivor of kidnapping attempt. Parents deceased in crash during pursuit. Vale withdraws from public life. Caleb stared at the grainy photo of a teenage Sienna, looking terrified, being shielded by Dominic Vale. He read the translation. After the incident, the Vale family had gone into lockdown. Threats from rival syndicates. The heiress was sent away, hidden in plain sight. Caleb sat back. She hadn't come to America to test him. She had come to hide. She had been running for her life. She needed a nobody, a boring, safe, invisible life to stay off the radar of whoever had killed her parents. He had been her camouflage. He felt a sudden, twisted sense of power return. She wasn't just a predator. She was a victim. She had trauma, and trauma was a lever he could pull. He grabbed his coat again. He wasn't going to let her win. He knew her secret now. He knew she was vulnerable. He rushed out of the apartment, hailing another cab. He directed it to Sterling Dynamics. It was 9:15 p.m. She would still be there. She was a workaholic. He knew that much. The office was dark, except for the executive floor. He used his pass key, thank God it still worked, and took the elevator up. Sienna was in his office. No, her office now. She was sitting at his desk, reviewing code on dual monitors. She looked tired. For a second, she looked like the Sienna he used to know. "Get out, Caleb," she said, without looking up. "You're violating the new protocol. CEO office hours end at 7. "I know about Zurich," Caleb said. The typing stopped. Sienna's hands hovered over the keyboard. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. "I know why you wore the cardigans," Caleb said, stepping into the room, his confidence returning. "I know why you married a nobody like me. I wasn't a husband, was I? I was a safe house." Sienna slowly swiveled the chair around. Her face was unreadable, but her skin had paled slightly. "You are treading on dangerous ground, Caleb." "You used me," Caleb shouted, approaching the desk. "You used me to hide from the people who killed your parents. You pretended to be poor so no one would look at you. And when the threat passed, or when you just got bored, you decided to destroy me." He leaned over the desk, his eyes wild. "Does the board know? Does the market know that their new chairwoman is a damaged, traumatized runaway who's terrified of her own shadow?" Sienna stood up. She didn't retreat. She looked him dead in the eye. "You're right, Caleb. I did hide. I came to New York to disappear. I chose you because you were safe. You were ambitious, but mediocre. You were obsessed with yourself, which meant you would never look closely enough at me to figure it out." Caleb flinched at the word mediocre. "But you're wrong about one thing," she continued, walking around the desk until she was inches from him. "I didn't leave because the threat passed. I didn't leave because I was bored." "Then why?" Caleb demanded. "Why destroy everything we had?" "Because you stopped being safe," Sienna whispered. "You became the very thing I was running from." Caleb blinked. "What?" "Greed, Caleb. Blind, unthinking greed. When you started cutting corners on the security protocols for the cloud platform. Do you remember? 3 years ago, I begged you not to. I told you it was dangerous. It was too expensive. We needed to scale. You created a back door," Sienna said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. "You sold user data to third-party aggregators to boost revenue before the Series B round. And one of those aggregators was a front for the syndicate that hunted my family." Caleb stepped back, his blood running cold. That's impossible. It was anonymized data." "Nothing is anonymous to them," Sienna screamed, losing her composure for the first time. "They found me because of you, Caleb, because of your greed. They tracked a login from our home IP address because you linked your personal devices to that compromised network." She took a breath, trembling. "I didn't leave you because I didn't love you. I left you because you led the wolves to my door. I had to run again. I had to go back to Dominic and turn myself into a weapon so they could never hurt me again. I spent the last 6 months hunting them down. They are gone now. All of them." She stared at him, tears of anger pricking her eyes. "I came back to fix the leak, Caleb. You are the leak." Caleb backed away, hitting the wall. The narrative he had built, of the scorned husband, the victim of a rich woman's whim, shattered into dust. He wasn't the victim. He was the villain who had sold his wife out for a better quarterly report. I didn't know," he stammered. "Ignorance is not a defense," Sienna said, her voice returning to steel. "It is a liability, and I am here to liquidate it." She pressed a button on her desk phone. "Security. Mr. Sterling is leaving. He won't be returning." Caleb looked at her one last time. He saw the woman he had married, the woman he had ignored, the woman he had betrayed, and he saw the titan who had risen from the ashes of his mistakes. "You can't fire me," he whispered. "I'm the founder." "Check your email, Caleb," she said, turning her back on him. "The board just voted again. You're done." 2 guards entered the room. Caleb didn't fight. He let them take him by the arms. As they dragged him out of the glass office, he looked back. Sienna was already typing again, fixing his code, fixing his company, fixing the world he had broken. The elevator doors closed, sealing him out of paradise forever. 3 months after the security guards escorted Caleb Sterling out of the building he built, the snow began to fall on New York City. It was a harsh winter, the coldest in a decade. Caleb sat in a booth at a diner in Queens, nursing a lukewarm coffee. His Italian suits were hanging in a closet in a storage unit. He was wearing a heavy parka he'd bought at an outlet mall. Across from him sat Arthur Pendleton. The lawyer looked uncomfortable, constantly checking his watch. "So that's it?" Caleb asked, his voice rough. "There's no recourse? Wrongful termination? Emotional distress?" Arthur sighed, sliding a thick manila envelope across the sticky table. "Caleb, you signed an employment contract when the Obsidian Trust took over. The morality clause was airtight. When they found the evidence of the data leak, the back door you authorized, it was immediate cause for termination with prejudice. If we sue, they countersue. And they have the logs, Caleb. They can prove you knowingly compromised user data." Caleb gripped the mug. "I did it to save the company. We were running out of runway. And in doing so, you exposed the private information of 3 million users, including, inadvertently, the location of a woman hiding from an international crime syndicate. You're lucky she isn't pressing criminal charges, Caleb. She's letting you walk away." "Walk away with nothing!" Caleb slammed his hand down. "They stripped my equity. They activated the clawback clauses. I have nothing, Arthur. The apartment is gone. The cars are repossessed. Lydia is suing me for loss of reputation because I advised her to quit her job before I got fired." "I'm sorry, Caleb." Arthur stood up, buttoning his coat. "But my retainer is exhausted. This is where we part ways. My advice? Leave New York. Go somewhere where the name Sterling doesn't remind people of the biggest tech scandal of the year." Arthur left. Caleb watched him go, feeling the cold draft from the door. He didn't leave New York. He couldn't. His ego wouldn't let him. For the next 6 months, Caleb tried to claw his way back. He drafted pitch decks for a new startup, a decentralized AI platform. It was brilliant. It was visionary. He set up meetings. He called in every favor he had owed to him from his days on the Forbes list. Most calls went to voicemail. The few meetings he got were short and brutal. "We like the tech, Caleb," a junior partner at Sequoia told him, not even offering him water. "But we can't touch you. The Obsidian Trust has made it clear that any firm funding you will be considered hostile to their interests. They're the biggest LP in the valley right now. We can't bite the hand that feeds us." "She's blacklisted me," Caleb whispered, realizing the scope of Sienna's power. "She hasn't said a word," the partner replied. "She doesn't have to. You're radioactive, Caleb. You're the guy who sold out his users. Trust is the currency of this industry, and you're bankrupt." Caleb walked out of the office in Palo Alto, took a bus to the airport, and flew back to JFK in economy class, wedged between a crying baby and the bathroom. By the 1-year anniversary of the divorce, Caleb Sterling, former tech darling, former millionaire, was working as an IT shift manager for a logistics firm in Jersey City. It was humble work, fixing servers, resetting passwords for truckers, managing a team of 3 teenagers who didn't know who he was. He lived in a studio apartment that smelled of damp drywall. He had stopped drinking. He had stopped dating. He simply worked, ate, and slept. The silence of his life was deafening. One rainy Tuesday, his boss, a gruff man named Miller, knocked on his door frame. "Hey, Sterling, we need you to head into the city. One of our high-end clients needs an emergency server migration. Their usual guy is sick." Caleb sighed. "Sure. Who's the client?" "Some art foundation. The Vale Philanthropy Group. Big money. Don't screw it up." Caleb froze. The blood drained from his face. "Send Mike," Caleb said quickly. "Mike is an idiot. You're the only one who knows the legacy systems. Go. It's double time." Caleb had no choice. He needed the money. He took the train into Manhattan. The city felt different now. Louder. Sharper. He walked with his head down, wearing a baseball cap and a tool belt. He was a ghost in the machine he used to think he owned. He arrived at the address. It wasn't the Ethelred Tower. It was a historic brownstone on the Upper East Side, converted into a gallery and office space. He signed in at the back entrance as vendor. He kept his head low, praying he could do the job and leave without being seen. He was working in the server room in the basement for 2 hours, entranced by the rhythm of the code. It was the only time he felt like himself anymore. When he finished, he packed his tools and headed for the service exit. "Excuse me." The voice came from the top of the stairs. It wasn't loud, but it stopped him dead. He looked up. Sienna was standing on the landing. She looked radiant. She was wearing a simple black turtleneck and trousers, her hair pulled back. She held a stack of files. She didn't look angry. She didn't look triumphant. She looked peaceful. "The server is stable," Caleb said, his voice cracking. He pulled his cap down lower. "I optimized the database. It should run faster now." Sienna walked down a few steps. She looked at his tool belt, his worn boots, the ID badge from the logistics company. "You're good at the work, Caleb," she said softly. "You always were. It was the other stuff that got in the way." Caleb felt a lump in his throat. He wanted to scream at her, to blame her, to beg her. But standing there, in the basement of her empire, he realized the truth she had told him that night in the penthouse. He had been the leak. He had been the weakness. "I'm sorry," he whispered. It was the first time he had said it, and meant it. "About the data, about your parents, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," Sienna said. "But you didn't care to know. That was the sin." She reached into her file and pulled out a check. "The invoice for the repair," she said, holding it out. Caleb hesitated, then walked up the steps to take it. Their fingers brushed. The electric shock he used to feel was gone. Now it was just cold distance. He looked at the check. It was for $5,000. Far more than the job was worth. "I don't need charity," Caleb said, his pride flaring up one last time. "It's not charity," Sienna said, turning back up the stairs. "It's severance, a final settlement. Use it to leave Jersey, Caleb. Go somewhere where nobody cares about tech. Open a bakery. You always said my bread was terrible. Maybe you can do better." She stopped at the top of the stairs and looked back. "Goodbye, Caleb. Try to be happy. It's much harder than being rich." She walked through the door and closed it. Caleb stood in the stairwell for a long time. He looked at the check. Then he looked at the door. He walked out into the rain. He walked past the front of the building. Through the large glass windows of the gallery, he saw a reception in progress. Waiters with champagne, photographers, and in the center of it all was Sienna, laughing with a group of people. She looked free. She looked like a diamond that had finally been cut and polished by the pressure of the world. Caleb turned up his collar against the wind. He walked toward the subway station. He didn't look back. He had flown too close to the sun, and he had burned. But as he descended into the dark tunnel of the subway, holding the check that would start his new, small life, he realized something strange. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't have to pretend to be a king. He was just a man in the rain, and that, he decided, would have to be enough. Wow. Just wow. From the penthouse to the basement. That is the story of Caleb Sterling and Sienna Vale. It's a brutal reminder, isn't it? Caleb spent 5 years thinking he was the main character, thinking he was the one carrying the weight, only to realize he was just a guest in Sienna's world. He chased the validation of the world, the money, the fame, the approval of people like Lydia, and in the process, he betrayed the only person who actually offered him safety. There are 2 massive lessons here. First, never mistake silence for weakness. Sienna wasn't weak, she was waiting. And second, integrity is the only currency that doesn't depreciate. Caleb had the skills, he had the drive, but he lacked the integrity to protect his users and his wife, and it cost him everything. I want to know what you guys think in the comments. Did Caleb deserve that ending? Was Sienna too harsh, or was it the ultimate justice? And be honest, would you have signed those divorce papers if you were him? If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about revenge, karma, and hidden identities, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a video. Thanks for watching, and remember, be careful who you underestimate. The person you think is holding you back might be the only thing keeping you safe. See you in the next one.